Wilder Boys, Brandon Walace. To Cowboy State readers, Wyoming's genuine Wilder boys and girls, with special thanks to Sneedby, Collard 3. 1. Splashing through murky pools of rainwater by the side of the road, the mud-splattered school bus rumbled to a stop. With an eager leap, Jake and his younger brother, Taylor, rose from their seats. Last day of school tomorrow. Taylor grinned at the bus driver as he reached the door. What are you gonna do without us? Mr. Polonachek grunted. I'm going to get some peace and quiet, that's what. Ah, admit it, Taylor said. You're gonna miss us, aren't ya? Like I'd miss this ulcer you kids been giving me. Jake nudged his brother from behind. Quit being a pain, Taylor. You're making everyone late. Taylor laughed and hopped down the bus steps. See ya tomorrow, Mr. Polonachek. Don't forget to bring your ulcer with you. Jake jumped down beside him on the gravel-strewn side of the road. Do you even know what an ulcer is, Taylor? Taylor ran his fingers through his wavy light brown hair and rolled his eyes up at Jake. At 13, Jake was only 2 years older than his brother, but that didn't stop him acting like he was a know-it-all adult sometimes. However, before Taylor could answer, the boys heard a sharp, high-pitched bark and saw a brown and white flash streaking toward them. Cody! Taylor shouted and squatted down to let the Jack Russell Terrier leap into his arms. How's our boy? The dog squirmed happily in Taylor's grasp and plastered slobber across his cheek. Jake laughed. He's right on time. Cody danced around the boy's feet as if they'd been away for years, rather than a few hours. He always seemed to know the exact time they'd return from school. As they did every day, the two brothers and Cody turned down a side street into their neighborhood, strolling home to check on their mom. Taylor happily splashed through puddles in the broken sidewalk and kicked a rock toward a peeling yellow fire hydrant that had been almost completely swallowed by weeds. I can't believe tomorrow is the last day of school. Taylor exclaimed. Man, I can't wait. I'm just gonna sleep in, play baseball, and forget about homework. Hey! Maybe you and me can go fishing? Jake raised an eyebrow at him. Fishing? Why not? Dad taught you, didn't he? I mean, before he left? Well, sort of, but we don't have any gear. We can get some. How? Do you have money to buy fishing tackle? Maybe Bull will get it for us. Taylor, get real. Jake huffed as the blast of a train whistle sounded from the freight yards down by the river. When's the last time Bull bought us anything? Taylor shrugged. It was just an idea. Jake kept quiet. The truth was, thinking about summer made his stomach feel like it was filled with gravel. Even though his school wasn't exactly a 5-star academy, Jake loved going there every day. He often spent lunch period in the library, devouring books. He hung out mostly in the action-adventure section, but he would read almost anything else in the library too. School was the one place he didn't have to worry about Mom or her psychotic boyfriend, Bull. Hey! Taylor blurted, pulling Jake from his thoughts. Check it out! Jake halted and followed Taylor's pointed finger, sweeping his dark hair away from his eyes. A brilliant yellow and black bird perched on a telephone wire less than 30 feet from where they stood. Geez, you ever seen one like that? No, Jake admitted. Crows, pigeons, and sparrows ruled the area around their neighborhood. He recognized all of them, but there was normally never anything this flashy. Maybe we'll find it in the book Mom gave us, he said. Let's look it up when we get home. As the boys approached the neighborhood church, they spotted a black and white police cruiser parked on the street. Jake recognized the large, familiar shape of Officer Grasso. Hey, Officer Grasso! Taylor shouted. How many bad guys you catch today? The policeman grinned. Not enough, as usual. How you boys doing? Only one more day of school, huh? You looking forward to summer? Taylor gave an exaggerated sigh. You can say that again. Jake just nodded. Both he and his brother liked the policeman. Once or twice a week, Officer Grasso would park here, a toothpick in his mouth, to greet the kids coming home from school. The neighborhood had a reputation for petty crime and drug use, and the policeman knew it made people feel safer to see him around. What are you going to do with all your free time? Officer Grasso asked. We were just talking about that, said Taylor. I'm gonna play baseball, and me and Jake are going fishing. Fishing, huh? Good idea. When I was a kid, the rivers around here were so dirty from the factories, we didn't dare go near 'em. Now I hear they hold base tournaments in them. While Taylor tossed a stick for Cody, Officer Grasso lowered his voice and turned to Jake, asking, Say, you seen Bull lately? He's been around, Jake answered. Why? The officer had asked the question casually, but Jake picked up an undercurrent beneath his words. Jake had to be careful with these kinds of situations. The fact was, he was afraid of Bull, but he couldn't let anyone know anything was wrong, least of all the cops. Although he would have liked nothing better than to see his mom's boyfriend thrown in jail, Jake knew that if he took a wrong step, Bull would come after him. Even worse, he might go after Taylor or their mom. The policeman shrugged. Oh, nothing, really. There was an incident last night not far from here. I thought maybe Bull might know something about it. Or did it himself, Jake thought. Did anyone get hurt? The officer lifted his hat, ran his hand over his thick sandy hair, and replaced the hat. Not this time. Well, Bull was home with us last night, Jake lied. I doubt he'd know anything. Before the policeman could ask anything else, Jake said, We'd better go check on our mom. Officer Grasso seemed unconvinced, but he let the boys go. Okay. You take care now. You too, said Jake, continuing down the street. Come on, Taylor. Cody. Jake felt dread in the pit of his stomach. He hated lying to Officer Grasso, but he couldn't take any chances where Bull was concerned. He had to keep his family safe. Jake and Taylor had lived in this neighborhood for the last 7 years, ever since their father left. It wasn't exactly Mansion Heights, but it was still a tight community. Gossip spread quickly. About 4 blocks deep by 10 blocks long, the neighborhood was lined by simple clapboard houses that had seen better days. For Jake and Taylor, it wasn't much, but it was home. A couple of houses down the boys passed the peach-colored house belonging to Mrs. Sanchez. As usual at this time of year, Mrs. Sanchez busied herself in the front yard, tending her small vegetable garden. Hi, Mrs. Sanchez, Jake greeted her. She straightened her back, wincing slightly from arthritis. Oh, hi, boys. How are you? Taylor and Cody hurried over to her. Anything coming up yet? You mean apart from your beanpole of a brother? Mrs. Sanchez flashed a wry smile at Jake, who was starting to look a lot older than his 13 years. Well, yes, as a matter of fact. Mrs. Sanchez pointed to a half-dozen fat twin leaves that had just poked up out of the ground cool. What are they? Taylor asked. Don't you remember? I showed them to you last year, said Mrs. Sanchez. Take a guess. Carrots? Nope. Jake? Jake had seen the plants before, and he knew the answer was lodged somewhere in his brain. Finally he said, Squash? Mrs. Sanchez beamed. Very good. Just for that, I'll let you have the first one that gets ripe. Ah, Taylor said, disappointed. Jake punched him in the shoulder. If you quit being such a pain, I might even share. Mrs. Sanchez laughed, then said, Jake, how is your mom doing? Good, Taylor answered for him. The nice weather's making her feel like her old self. Jake knew that wasn't exactly the truth, but he didn't see any point in contradicting his younger brother. Mrs. Sanchez nodded. Well, you let me know if there's anything I can do. Thanks. At the end of the block, the boys approached their own place, a small house about twice as big as Mrs. Sanchez's. Unfortunately, it was twice as shabby, two at least since their mom had gotten sick. White paint peeled like dead skin from the wooden siding, while the wooden slats of the fence had begun to fall off one by one. Every year, Bull promised to get the place fixed up and painted, but like most of Bull's promises, this one never amounted to anything. Maybe I'll just do it myself this summer, Jake thought as he pulled open the screen door and entered the house. The boys let their book-filled packs plunk to the floor, and then they tiptoed back to check on their mom. The dusty, yellowed blinds were drawn in her room, but even in the dim light, Jake could make out his mother's sleeping form and hear her ragged breath. A dozen orange vials of pills, half of them with their caps off, sat on the small table next to her bed. Their mom, Jennifer, had never told the boys exactly what was wrong with her, but Jake had overheard the words depression and anxiety. It had started 4 years earlier, about the time Bull had shown up. Since then she'd grown steadily worse. First she'd had to quit her job at the bank. Then she stopped being able to go out. For the last year she'd spent most of her time in bed. For the millionth time, Jake wondered how different it might have been if their father, Abe Wilder, had stuck around. And for the millionth time, anger boiled up inside him. If their father hadn't been so selfish, Bull wouldn't be in their lives. Most of all, their mother might not be sick. Come on, Taylor said. Let's see if there's anything to eat. Shaking off his anger, Jake followed his younger brother into the kitchen. Taylor yanked open the refrigerator. Whoa! Look here! Usually, the fridge held nothing but Bull's beer and maybe a half-empty ketchup bottle. Today a fresh pack of hot dogs sat on the middle shelf. Looks like Bull used Mom's food stamps to buy some real food for once, Jake said. I saw him first. Taylor grabbed the package and tore it open. He shoved one of the cold hot dogs into his mouth and gave another one to Cody. Just then the boys heard the front screen door open, followed by heavy footsteps. A moment later the scraggly, unshaved face of their mother's boyfriend appeared in the kitchen door. Jake's stomach dropped as Bull's gray eyes flashed toward him. Hey, Bull, Taylor said. Thanks for getting us the dash. Bull's face contorted with rage. What do you think you're doing? Those francs aren't for you punks. And they're especially not for your mangy mutt. Bull kicked at Cody, but the dog deftly leaped to the side, cowering from the stocky, barrel-chested brute standing over him. Leave him alone! Taylor hollered. He didn't do anything to you. He's eating my food. Taylor, Jake began, trying to calm his brother. Jake knew that once Taylor got going, there wasn't much that could stop him. Even though fights with Bull only ever ended one way. It's our mom's money that bought this food. Taylor shouted at Bull. Cody can have as much as he wants. You'd better watch your mouth, Bull snarled, stepping forward. Taylor didn't back down. Instead he puffed his chest out and glared up at Bull, his green eyes flashing. Why? You're not even part of this family. If our dad were here, he'd kick you out on your butt. Bull's face grew even redder, all the way up his veiny forehead to the roots of his slicked back hair. Thank God, I ain't your dad. Your dad was a worthless loser, and crazy, too. What kind of man would leave his kids and his sick wife to go chase some crazy daydream? She wasn't sick before you came along. Taylor shouted back. You made her sick. You make me sick. You steal and cheat and... Bull took another step forward. Why, you lying little Bull raised his hand to strike Taylor, his sinewy forearm slick with sweat. No! Jake shouted, leaping in front of Bull's arm as it began to swing. The blow caught Jake flush on the cheek, knocking him to the floor. Cody began barking furiously. Jake saw purple spots but struggled to get back up, afraid Bull would strike Taylor next. However, instead of continuing the attack, Bull just glared at the two boys. You thieving little punks. If it wasn't for your... Bull didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he spun around and stormed out of the house, tearing off the screen door as he left. 2. Cody whined and rushed over to lick Jake's cheek. A pinkish blotch was already forming, clashing with his deep blue eyes. His dark hair was plastered across his face. Are you okay? Taylor asked, helping his brother to his feet. You didn't need to do that. Cody and me could have taken him. Jake didn't bother responding to that, he just pushed back his hair and stared at Taylor. Despite Taylor's enthusiasm, neither of the brothers was a match for their mother's boyfriend. And Jake might look older, but he was still only 13. I'm okay, Jake muttered, but inside he felt an all too familiar mix of anger and helplessness at having to put up with a thug like Bull. Come on, he said, trying to change the subject. Let's look up that bird we saw earlier. Taylor picked up the hot dog package and shoved another one into his mouth. He held the package out to his brother. You want one? Jake couldn't help cracking a smile. Might as well. My face already paid for it. Taylor laughed and handed one of the cold wieners to Jake, and for good measure, fed another to Cody, too. Back in their room, Jake pulled out their bird book and passed it to his brother. The book had been a gift from their mother the Christmas before, and it was already full of dog-eared pages and highlighted passages. What do I look for? Taylor asked, plopping down on his bed. Jake thought about it. Even though his mom had somehow managed to send the boys to camp the previous summer, and one of the counselors had taken them birding several times, Jake had always gotten mixed up trying to identify the songbirds. Not sure, he told Taylor. Try warblers or finches. While Taylor and Cody flipped through the bird book, Jake's eyes landed on his dad's old journal, and he pulled it off the shelf. He sat down on his own bed and began leafing through it. As angry as he often felt toward his dad, Jake prized this journal more than anything else he and Taylor possessed. Their hands had worn the leather cover smooth, but the precious contents remained protected. The journal contained a strange hodgepodge of entries, notes from his father's travels through Wyoming as a young man, sketches of birds, reptiles, and mammals from right here in Pennsylvania, hunting and fishing tips, a section on medicinal and useful plants in the West. More than anything, the journal contained their father's dreams of finding his own kind of utopia, a place where he and his family could live off the land. Clearly, Abe had been obsessed with finding the perfect place. I think I found it, Taylor said. What? Jake crossed over to his brother's bed. Setting down their dad's journal, he looked at the page Taylor pointed to in the bird book. American goldfinch, huh? Yeah, I think we saw the male, said Taylor. Jake took the book and quickly flipped through the warbler section. Then he flipped back to the goldfinch. The picture on the page definitely had the same gold and black colors they'd seen on the bird earlier. He smiled. I think you're right. And I thought I knew them all around here. Taylor grinned, but the smile faded when he saw their dad's journal. Jake? What? Do you think Dad really was crazy? Like Bull said? Jake lowered the bird book and paused. Part of him did wonder if his father had gone nuts. Mostly, though, he just thought his dad was selfish. What else would make him leave his family like that? No, he told Taylor. I don't think Dad was crazy. I think he just had an idea he couldn't let go of. You mean going out west to live off the land? Jake nodded. But why wouldn't he take us, Jake? Why did he have to leave? Jake sat down next to him and shrugged. I don't know, Taylor. Just then they heard a tap on the door. Taylor got up to open it. Their mother stood there, leaning against the doorframe for support. There are my boys, she said, her mouth spreading into a weak smile. Mom. Taylor gave his mother a hug. Mind if I sit? She asked. Jake quickly slid their father's journal under Taylor's pillow and got up to help their mother over to his brother's bed. The boys perched on either side of her, while Cody leaped up and circled twice before resting his chin in Jennifer's lap. So, she asked, stroking the dog's head. How was the second to last day of school? Good, Taylor said. No homework. Both Jake and his mom laughed. I checked out some extra books from the library, Jake told her. It's too bad they can't keep it open for you. Jennifer stopped mid-sentence and reached up to touch the red mark on Jake's cheek. Even as sick as she was, concern etched her face. What happened to you? Taylor began, but Jake cut him off. I ran into a metal post at school. Jennifer might be depressed, but she wasn't stupid. Who did this, Jake? I had a little disagreement with someone. My face got in the way of his hand. Jennifer lowered her own hand, and her body seemed to slump. It was nothing, Jake quickly assured her, putting his arm around her back for support. Jennifer didn't respond, just breathed wheezily in and out. Finally she said, Promise me, boys, that you will try to be good. And promise me you'll try to get along with Bull. Why? We all know he's no good. Jake hissed. Jennifer's eyes met Jake's. He's the only thing we've got right now, she said softly. We're lucky to have a man around here at all. Why? So he can spend your disability checks and use your food stamps to buy pizza for his friends? Jennifer dropped her eyes. No, not for that. Then what? Taylor asked. Because, their mother said, we don't have anyone else. But we don't need anyone else, Taylor insisted. You, me, and Jake would do fine by ourselves. Jake and I could take care of you until you get better. Jennifer managed a smile and kissed her younger son on the top of his head, ruffling his wavy hair. I know you could, but... But what? Jake guessed what his mother was thinking, that she might get even sicker, but he didn't dare say it. Instead he said, You should get back to bed, Mom. Come on, Taylor. Gimme a hand. The short conversation had clearly exhausted their mother. Once they got her back to her room and settled into her own bed, she asked the boys to snuggle up for a while. Okay. Taylor eagerly responded. He climbed in on the far side while Jake sat next to his mom's pillow. Looking down at her, Jake couldn't believe how thin and pale she'd grown in the past year. He swallowed, but it didn't get rid of the sadness he felt or his worry that she might be getting even worse. Tell us about Dad again, Taylor asked. Jake saw his mother bite her lip, but then she began. Your father loved you very much. I wish I could remember him. Your dad was a good man, mostly, Jennifer said. He knew everything about animals and nature. He could do anything he set his mind to. Then why did he leave? Jennifer took a deep breath. He was a dreamer. It wasn't enough for him to make a living. He always had bigger ideas, and when his company let him go. That was his chance to go live in the wilderness, Jake offered. Yes. Is that why he left? Taylor pressed. Their mom nodded. Didn't he want us to go with him? Jake saw his mother again bite her lip. He what? Taylor asked. Jennifer paused, the conversation clearly taking a toll on her. Then she said, "Boys, I need to show you something." Jake and Taylor glanced at each other, confused. Jake, go into my closet and look behind my coat. Jake got up and stepped over to the closet. Under the sweaters, you'll see a box. Bring it to me. Jake lifted up some old sweaters and was surprised to find a faded orange shoe box. He slid it out from under the sweaters and carried it to his mom. What's that? Taylor asked. His mom slowly raised herself up. Jake quickly piled pillows behind her for her to lean against. When Abe, your father, went out west, he wanted us to go with him. Jake's and Taylor's eyes met, wide with surprise. He wrote to me a lot, Jennifer continued, pleading with me to take you both out to Wyoming. Why didn't we go? Jake asked. His mom's jaw clenched. Maybe I should have, she said. But I just didn't know if it was right for you boys. But why not? Taylor pressed, growing more agitated. Wyoming would have been great. Shush, Taylor, Jake said. Jennifer continued. Your father, he didn't have a job out there. He constantly moved around. I didn't see how you could go to school, or even how we could survive. I almost got us bus tickets a couple of times, but then I got sick. That made the decision once and for all. No one said anything for a few moments. Taylor slowly shook his head. Jake was stunned. Finally he said, "What's in the box?" Jennifer patted the orange shoe box. These are the letters he wrote to me. You should have them. Maybe they'll answer some of the questions I know you have. But why are you telling us now? Taylor asked. Jennifer's body seemed to slump again. I thought it was time. Boys, I'm tired. I need to sleep for a while. Jake helped his mother get comfortable again while Taylor pulled the blankets up snugly around her neck. Thanks, Jennifer said weakly. I love you, boys. We love you, Mom, said Taylor. Jake opened his mouth to say something, but his mother's eyes were already closing. Come on, Taylor. Let's let Mom rest, Jake whispered. As he slid off the bed and placed his foot on the floor, Jake felt something slip beneath it. He looked down to see one of the floor tiles had moved. Great, he thought. One more thing that needs to be fixed. As he bent down to replace the tile, however, he noticed a hole underneath it. What are you doing? Taylor asked, placing the orange shoebox on the floor. There's a space here under this tile, Jake whispered. Really? Is anything in there? I don't know. Jake got down on his knees and reached into the shallow hole. He pulled out something heavy wrapped in an old shirt. Feeling the shape of the object under the thin material, he hoped it wasn't what he thought it was as he carefully pulled back the cloth. A gun! Taylor cried, reaching out for it. Get off, Taylor, Jake said, pulling the weapon away from him. Let me see it. No. Jake didn't know much about guns, but he did know that they spelled trouble. Is that a 6-shooter? Taylor asked. Jake studied the weapon. It was definitely a revolver of some kind, with a brown plastic grip. Jake saw the words .38 Special engraved into the short chrome barrel, and remembered reading about those guns in detective novels. He was just as curious as Taylor, but he knew that they'd stumbled across something they shouldn't have, and he tried to make out like it was no big deal. Yeah. I think it's a 6-shooter, Jake said, wrapping the weapon back up. Why can't I see it? Because you just can't, so don't ask again. Taylor sulked while Jake set the gun aside, and he peered down into the hole. This time he pulled out a large Ziploc plastic bag. Money! Taylor gasped. Even through the plastic, Jake could see the blurred portraits of Benjamin Franklin and Ulysses S. Grant on bundles of $50 and $100 bills. First a gun and now cash. It didn't take a detective to figure out what was going on. How much is in there? Taylor asked. Jake opened the bag and quickly flicked through the bundles of bills. Looks like thousands, he told his brother. Wow. Where'd it come from? Take a wild guess. Bull? You mean he's had money all along? Looks like. Well, let's take some of it. Again, Jake's voice grew hard.